I remember my friend in high school had a really, really deep voice. So when I'd talk to him on the phone, I'd have to be like, can you like pitch your voice higher? Because I can't even, the phone isn't even like picking up your voice.
Yeah.
But it was always really funny because he'd just like go from like so deep to being like, is this better? Or something.
Yeah. Yeah. The person I record with, Joseph, he, I can see this in the audio files because I do the audio editing, but it'll go from like, as light as possible to like almost full volume within like a sentence sometimes. It's like, and he's aware of it too. I know how he speaks so well now, just from having to listen to him for like the 5 hours or whatever it takes to edit the episodes.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, it's too bad Joseph isn't here this week.
Yeah.
But we're going to have a guest on, Sky Cubacub. So Sky is one of the most famous living artists in Chicago. And I had the honor of being their first ever intern. But it's not actually that crazy of a coincidence that like I know Sky, because as it turns out, Sky and I went to the same high school and then we went to the same college. And there was one year we sort of overlapped, the final year, but I mostly just knew of Sky through everyone else talking about their work and how interesting it was, because Sky is a chainmail artist.
Yeah, I got to meet Nathan at a colloquium class, the like non-credit class at Northside College Prep where we went to high school, because I used to just volunteer in the art classes on the days that I had off, and usually on these colloquium days. So when he was in the class called The Future with Miss Capeless and talking about C-Punk,
yeah,
I think I got to see some of that presentation actually live, which was very exciting.
Yeah, and you kind of knew some of the people in the C-Punk presentation, like Teen Witch Fan Club, aka Zane Curtis. I know you know them.
Yeah.
Probably some of the other people too.
Yeah, I got to meet a couple of the folks later on through my friends like Heather Lynn and Sarah Weiss. And then I remember you being like, oh my gosh. I was like,
Yeah, that was my thing to nerd out about in high school, was all of these niche Tumblr famous people. But yeah, so that's how I know Sky. And I, as an intern for Sky, specifically learned chainmail through you.
Yeah, I really wanted to teach Nathan how to chainmail when he was still in high school, but I don't know, I guess I was busy or something, or maybe we were both busy. But then when Nathan went to SAIC and I had been starting out Rebirth Garments, I launched the line in 2014, but then I started having interns, and I created the internship for Nathan so that I could just teach him how to chainmail, because he wanted to make a chainmail shirt to wear every day for his next like style.
Yeah, I actually only ever wore that chainmail shirt once in public.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to wear chainmail all the time.
Yeah, no, I don't know why I didn't wear it more. I guess just like it was for me kind of, okay, living in Chicago, sometimes you do think, okay, what's the worst case scenario? And I guess at the time I was just like, wait, if I got shot while wearing this is just like all shrapnel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
totally.
That might have been the deterrent, but I actually don't even remember thinking I was going to wear it like every day, but I should have, because it took so much work. It was like a summer straight of me adding like, I mean, for me to even add like 6 rows, it would be like 3 or more hours of work. Like It was a long time. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's still just like, it was just an amazing time to get to work with you, and chainmail is such a good process for like neurodivergent folks. So I feel like, yeah, when you have like special interests in hyperfixations, like chainmail is good, like calming, repetitive thing to do and focus on.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get into like the process of making chainmail, but I want to introduce you first, but I want you to introduce yourself. And so I just have a few questions about like your brand, which I already know the answers, but the listeners don't.
Yes.
So What is your like early relationship with chainmail and how did you get into it?
So I was really into beading starting when I was 5 years old. I took a class with a friend who was from the YMCA. They had a birthday party at this place called Caravan Beads, and we made some beaded necklaces. And then I was just like, this shop is amazing. And it was right by the YMCA. So I would just go there after swim classes every week and get some beads. And around the time when I was, I think 11 or 12, they started to offer chainmail classes there from my teacher, Rebecca Mojica, but they only allowed folks to join the classes if they were 13 years old or older, which is like kind of a funny cutoff. Like if you're so close to that age, like you should just like make exceptions for people if they're like that interested. But they're like, no, you have to be 13. I found out about them offering those classes because my mom would sell her Christmas ornaments that she hand painted on porcelain at different types of like arts and crafts fairs. And one year, one of the folks right next to her in a booth had sterling silver chainmail. And she was like, oh, I learned it at Caravan Beads from this person, Rebecca Mojica. And I was like, oh my gosh, I take classes there all the time. So that's like, yeah, how I found out about it. And I just was super drawn to it because it was like beading, but looked a lot more badass. And I was like very concerned with looking badass. I think because of always being very, just people always read me as such like a tiny, like weak, quote unquote, little girl. And then I think also being Asian on top of it, it's just like the things that people put onto me made me very uncomfortable. So I was like, I got to look as tough and badass as possible. And that was also around the time when I got interested in like punk culture. So I really liked kind of the aesthetic ties to punk culture that chainmail had. But yeah, so I just basically waited until I was 13 and then signed up for the first class after my 13th birthday. And I ended up finishing my whole chainmail project, which is a Mobius bracelet, within the time that it took all of these middle-aged women. Like they just made like 1 inch worth of this project, and I finished it immediately. So Rebecca was like, oh, wow, like I guess this is a thing that kids can really, or like, yeah, younger folks can really jive with, like really pick it up really fast. So I like to think that I inspired her for her later on project when she was making kids kits on how to make chainmail for like people 5 years and up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, children, especially at that age, I think between like 10 and 13, the things they do, like they kind of never forget them. Like me, I did like martial arts, for example, during that age range. And I still remember it in a way that like if I was learning it as an adult and then do it for a few years, I would not retain it.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And so you continued your chainmail practice into high school and then college, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went all in, like basically as soon as I learned chainmail when I was 13, it was the only thing that I wanted to do ever. It just, calmed my brain so much as like a person with anxiety. I just always needed to stim, but I didn't have that like neurodivergent language yet. But yeah, so I remember early on in maybe my second or third class with Rebecca, I was like, maybe if I work my entire life, I could make a chainmail garment. I think I specifically said chainmail dress. And she was like, oh yeah, totally. You should go for it. But then by the time I was 15, I made my first chainmail, I guess, infused garment. It was a collaboration with my Filipino Grandma Cora. She helped sew the base that I designed, and then I made the chainmail to go on top of it and sewed it to to the dress. And that was for what was called a 20-hour project in my art cubed class at Northside College Prep, which is like the advanced R1 class that my year piloted. And yeah, so that was my first chainmail infused garment.
I saw some of your early pieces. I've held them in my hands. And yeah, I do remember the one, the earliest one. Yeah. It's sort of like, isn't it like one shoulder sort of?
It's a halter.
Yeah.
It's a halter dress. It's kind of inspired by like circus ballerinas, I guess, like a dark circus ballerina.
You're telling me you did not model it off of American Apparel halters?
Yeah, I had like a little tutu type thing. It was very short. Yeah. I remember in my critique, Mr. Lucero, who like had left the next year to be like a fancy professor, during the critique, he was like, "Oh, what's a good way to say that this looks like S&M?" And like me and my girlfriend at the time, Abby, were the only ones who knew what that meant in the class. And somebody was like, "You mean M&Ms?" But I was like very upset about that though, because when I started doing chainmail, I like pretty early on knew about kind of like fetish wear connected to chainmail and like S&M connected to chainmail. But you know, as a early teen, I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing. Like, stop trying to sexualize me. So when I first started, I was like, no, this is not what I'm doing at all. Now I'm like, whatever. I love everybody wearing chainmail. I don't care. But at the time, I was just like, this is weird that people keep on saying this to me, and I'm a 13 to 15-year-old. Like, please go away.
You know, it's another early garment I've seen was at one point you tried making like a chainmail skirt. The rings were so heavy. Like even I had trouble holding it. Yeah. So I ended up making a lot of like purely chainmail garments, I think starting in my junior year. Yeah, in junior year of high school. But yeah, when I was making my senior collection in high school, and in senior year of high school, I tried to make this dress with a circle skirt and chainmail that was like a floor length circle skirt, and it was just impossible. Like, that's why usually when I would make chainmail, I would like try it on as I would go, and I would basically be draping the chainmail onto me, or like first maybe a mannequin, but then trying it on me as I went. That circle skirt was like the first time where I was like trying to just use like a paper pattern and like build the flat pieces of the pattern, and then like a store-bought pattern, and then chainmail them together. And I was like, this was clearly a mistake. I was doing it right in the first place with my draping method. Should not do it in this way of like trying to follow what fashion's rules of making clothing. Like, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, for me, when I made that chainmail vest when I was an intern for you, as I was working on it, kept comparing it to my body like the entire time. Yeah. And so it's custom made for my body, and I look very similar to how I did in college and high school. Totally. So it still like fits. Pretty much every time people come over to my house, they notice the chainmail and they're like, "Can I pick that up?" And then sometimes they try to put it on, but for some people, it's like Joseph, the person I podcast with, he was just content putting it on his head as like one of those chainmail, like a coif. Coif, yeah, that was good enough for him, but like he would not have fit it. But yeah, that's like a nice thing about working with chainmail because it's such a slow process. Like, you get an intimate relationship with the pieces as you work with them because you can just keep comparing them to your body and holding it, and you form a relationship with the piece. Yeah, and it's nice too because like chainmail, you can, as long as you can source the same like color or shine of rings, you can consistently you can constantly change it. So if your body is growing, you can adjust it to make it bigger, and it's seamless to add to it unless the rings don't match, which I made these chainmail pants
in high school, and later on I needed to like make them a little bit bigger because I was a cyclist. So,
Yeah.
you know, but then, yeah, they had started making the rings like shinier or something. So I was like, gosh, this like doesn't exactly match anymore,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
It's not that easy, I think, to get consistency between batches for when you're getting jump rings that are anodized or a lot of different processes, though. Like they'll say on websites, like, you know, we can't guarantee consistency.
Totally.
But yeah, for me with my vest, if I ever did need to make it bigger, it'd be pretty easy because like...
Yeah, it was all silver.
Yeah. But also just like the way I had made it, the sides, there literally is a seam that's very visible.
Yeah.
And I can just open it up and add more, make it wider, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Totally.
But yeah, we still haven't got to one of the main questions of introducing you. But what is your clothing company and how did it come to be?
My clothing line is called Rebirth Garments, and it's a clothing line for queer and trans disabled folks of all sizes and ages. And it came to be because in high school, when I was so into chainmail and I was also very into making my own clothing, there was something that I didn't have access to that I desired greatly, and I also didn't know how to make, and that was gender-affirming undergarments such as a chest binder or packing underwear. So I had started designing some different things that I would love to have because I tried to like look into ones that were already made, but most of them were one, extremely boring. Like they were just like coming in black or white and then like a beige that was only for like light skinned white people. But I also just didn't have access to those because they were only sold in sex toy shops, and they still largely are only sold in person at sex toy shops. But you can usually access them in other ways at different like queer community centers these days. And then now there are more clothing lines that offer them that are cool. Yeah, I wanted these types of garments. I think when I was really wanting packing underwear, I had been thinking about making chainmail packers, which we actually have on the table. So yeah, it's a little kind of prosthetic to create a bulge in your pants, but I wanted something that wasn't based on human anatomy, and I wanted it to be more sculptural. So I really enjoy these because they're made out of chainmail. So they're also just like stem toys that you can play with in your hands, like separate from that. But yeah, so I guess making clothing was always extremely important to me in order to like cope with my neurodivergence and madness and anxiety and stuff. So creating clothing in a faster way than chainmail was kind of also what I wanted to do with Rebirth Garments, making something that people could move in, dance in, feel good in, because making the chainmail collection of 18 looks in 1 year was amazing, but just not accessible to people to be able to wear on a daily basis. And a lot of the things you couldn't like move that well in because they're just too heavy, or like sculptural aluminum skirts so that were out of sheet metal, so that was like difficult.
Yeah, sheet metal is so tempting as like a metal worker. Like it's available in a lot of places, whereas a lot of these other supplies are not. But like it's so like it just doesn't feel like a nice material. It's like, and it's also like easy to cut yourself, and then if it's steel, it rusts. It's like, as a metal worker, it's tempting, but like I don't really work with it. Besides, if I wanted to like etch a plate, which I haven't done in a very long time, but if I wanted to, that's what I would still use it for.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I still have a roll of sheet aluminum that I look at all the time, and I'm like, should I make something out of this? And then I'm like, no, I don't have. I don't want to risk getting cut. Although I think I never did. I think I was pretty careful, but I was more agile when I was a teenager.
That's good.
When I was 21, I gained like a stomach disorder kind of stomach disability. Now I think it was just related to me having polycystic ovarian syndrome. But so I stopped being able to wear a lot of the clothing that I had previously worn because in high school, I basically just only wore very tight skinny jeans that were patterned from Trip. But like, yeah, that became extremely painful to wear. So I just wanted to make really stretchy, comfy clothes. And I had learned how to sew spandex in high school for my chainmail collection, which was called Repetitive Motions, because my high school teachers were very, very supportive and amazing about my work. But they were like, we are getting in trouble from parents. You have to come up with something to go underneath your chainmail clothing because it's too see-through. So I had been like trying to use store-bought unitards and leotards, but I thought that they were just boring and ugly. So my first girlfriend's mom, who was both a dancer and a quilter, made spandex unitards starting in the 80s. And so she taught me how to make a unitard. And that's what really started me off with making my spandex clothing. So I took that when I no longer could wear the clothing that I used to wear and made soft, stretchy clothing. But I still like pair it with chainmail accessories every day. I just don't chainmail as much as I used to because it's
a
lot of work.
So you started out, instead of sewing machines, did you start on sergers?
I had learned a little bit on sewing machines before, but yeah, pretty much right away, I would say sergers just like clicked with my brain a lot better and were easier. So yeah, that's what I like. And then I was like, wow, I love sewing with stretch fabric because it's actually pretty forgiving. Like I know a lot of people think it's a lot scarier to work with, but you can cut out like pretty goofy shapes and sew them together and they'll like look professional with a serger. I see how forgiving it is now that I work so much with like kids as young as 7. Like they'll just like hack out a weird shape and we'll sew it and then it looks like amazing. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah. Like they make wearable garments, the 7-year-olds?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's the main thing that I've been working on for the past couple of years now is Radical Fit with the Chicago Public Library. But I started this like incubator program with them. But when I was kind of coming up with it, I just started doing it here in the Rebirth Garments studio with young people that I already knew or like who I peripherally knew. And then I started doing these like one-on-one lessons with youth as young as 7.
Yeah. And as part of your Radical Fit program, would you want to explain just for listeners what radical visibility is?
Yes. Yeah. So radical visibility is the ideology behind Rebirth Garments. I had a lot of people who were very confused about what I was doing when I started Rebirth Garments. Yeah, they didn't really understand what I meant by making clothing for queers and trans folks with disabilities. They'd just be like, oh, well, can't queer folks and disabled folks just wear normal clothes or something? And then also they'd get confused being like, oh, like queerness isn't a disability. And I'd be like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about folks with disabilities who just are queer, but they just like couldn't imagine that disabled folks could like possibly have sex if they wanted to, or have a sexuality, or even have a gender. Sometimes people would say like really weird things. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with this like, I have to basically write a thesis to talk about all these things. So I wrote Radical Visibility, a queer crip dress reform movement manifesto, and it's all about taking up space visually, physically, auditorily, texturally, as people who are multiply marginalized, refusing to assimilate to the, dominant cis hetero patriarchal fat-phobic culture. And that's like, all based on European white supremacist beauty standards, just like completely rejecting all of that and creating our own movement of this very colorful way to stand out, just so that people can't ignore us, can't ignore that we are people too, can't ignore that we have needs and desires, and, we want to be cute. So that's what radical visibility is about.
Yeah. And, people with disabilities in many ways should be the most celebrated in society. And so I know that initially, and probably still in today, the fashion performances that you do for Rebirth Garments are sort of dance parties, and they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in high school and I would display my work, I was really into the mannequin folks who would like buskers on the street who would maybe paint themselves all silver or bronze and pretend to be a mannequin. So I was doing that at first. And, that was a fun...
Wait, did you dress up as a busker?
Kind of. Well, so I would wear my things and then I would pose.
Oh, yeah.
And then, the first chainmail dress that I made, I think I actually ended up looking a lot like Amanda Palmer just because my friend really liked Amanda Palmer. So I was trying to look like some sort of doll, but then they did Amanda Palmer eyebrows on me, which did kind of inspire me to start doing my fun makeup the way that I do with my creative eyeliner.
Yeah.
But I would just posed and was silent for a lot of the first couple, fashion, those were fashion performances, but they were more quiet performance art type things. But then I think in the later on, I was oh, I want to talk to people. So I just would stand up there posing, but I would talk to the folks. And I saw that I really enjoyed the questions that people had for me about my art. And I was oh, this is kind of a way to get people to, it really clicked for me as a neurodivergent person. I was I do love talking to people about art, but I just basically never want to start a conversation on my own because I'm too socially anxious for it. So by wearing something interesting, it just brings people to me, and then they can ask me a question, and then I can start a conversation.
Yeah, I remember one time you were telling me that you met Yo-Yo Ma, and you didn't really realize it was him, but he was very friendly with you. Because
I heard my teacher Romy introduce him as some, I just heard his name wrong. So I was he looks like Yo-Yo Ma, but I guess he's just somebody else. But then I was wait, who is and then they were no, that's Yo-Yo Ma. I put my headpiece on him and it was so cute. The pictures of him wearing the headpiece, before he's wearing the headpiece, he's he's just looking kind of anxious. But then when he put the headpiece on, he just lit up. So I'm that's literally what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to make you feel good.
Yeah. But I think that it is clear that you really do like talking to people just based on the range of people you've worked with. And even with children, I remember when I first started interning with you, I was a bit dissatisfied with my peers at SAAC for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
And I was angsty, and I would tell you I don't know, I just don't like people my age. When I talk to older people or younger people, I just feel I feel a greater love for humanity just because I think it's easier to be less critical with people that are in a different phase of life. And I remember one time you telling me that I would kind of helped you start to view youth in a new perspective in that way.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I don't really remember, but
yeah,
that's cute.
But it's I myself, I love talking to people. That's part of the reason why I like working for the library, which some people intuitively might think, oh, that's a quiet space. It's not for community or public conversation. But I get to meet people that I would never really have an ability to otherwise.
Totally.
I see fascinating people all the time on the street, but you can't hit up conversations with them.
Yeah.
But I get to at the library, and it's really satisfying because when you have a fascination with others, I think it just it's just part of loving yourself and having a good life.
Totally. Yeah. yeah, I mean, I have seen how much it has brought people to me, and I've had so many amazing friendships because of it. So yeah, I think that's also a big part of radical visibility. It's like not necessarily for the, like, it's not centered on the view of others who are not in the community. It is actually centered on like, you be radically visible so that you can find other people in your community. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then as part of radical visibility, I know that like the garments themselves serve to make people with disabilities more visible in public, and to, instead of like making them blend in, which they shouldn't have to, and they stand out and they're celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that the chainmail kind of conceptually serves a different purpose where it's about protection, right?
Yeah. Well, it's similar. It's like the chainmail helps me stand out, but at the same time, yeah, I've always thought of it as emotional armor. So like it's emotional armor because it does give me, yeah, it makes me feel more protected, because I think by it looking kind of wild, some people would stay away from me more, because they'd be like, oh, that weird person wearing this wild thing. I think it's less so these days necessarily, but when I first started, people really thought I looked completely wild. But I feel like with, more people wearing interesting things over the years, people have been like desensitized to like folks wearing weird things.
There's been like an altification across society where I know for like my own family or just people I know personally, like how they dress now compared to 2010s or like mid 2000s, it's so much more complex. Like even, I mean, what you can buy in stores and online, it's just like there's so many more options to just not look basic.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So like, I used to get grabbed a lot on the CTA because I'm so small, and like, people read me as a femme, even though I don't identify with that. But like, once I started wearing my chainmail headpieces, and then I think even more so wearing my makeup that looks like tattoos under my eyes, then most people don't mess with me, which was awesome. But it's like, the people I didn't want to mess with me would stay away. But then the people who like other queers would be like, oh, this is interesting, this is cool, or like other artists. So then, it's like, I was talking about it being like I'm being a poison frog, like I'm attracting some things, but also like repelling others. But it's like, I'm attracting just the things that I want and trying to repel the bigots.
And the headpiece you're wearing today and the other headpieces you've worn for years, I'll explain this for the audience. So Sky is wearing like a chainmail headpiece that's made out of a pattern called scale mail. And the way that it works, it kind of looks like dragon scales in a way. And it is protective, but also the spikes, I think, do create a bit of an offensive quality, which I can now see, with how you're describing people interacting with you. I purely always think of chainmail as being protective, because I mean, that's the function. But the scale mail looks like it's more offensive. Yeah.
But then at the same time, it feels like a weighted blanket on my head. So it feels comforting to me. And then, it's like, oh my gosh, one time I think I like misplaced one of my headpieces for a second, and I had to give a talk, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do a talk without my hair.
Yeah.
I'm too naked.
Yeah. And it does feel good. I put some on before, and they do feel like very pleasant.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But we're going to move into just chainmail in general pretty soon. We've covered like Sky's creative practice, Rebirth Garments, the early experiences with chainmail. But there's one question I want to ask directly before we get into chainmail more broadly. And that is, I know that like you definitely had a choice between like living in Chicago and living in New York City, where there's the fashion industry, and people have like tempted you to move there and you've chosen not to. And I appreciate you as a Chicago booster, but would you just want to talk about your decision to stay here and build your brand in Chicago?
Yeah, I guess I always thought about it as like, if I went to New York, then it'd be much harder to like kind of try to enact change in the fashion industry because they're so set in their ways. But by staying in Chicago, which didn't really have that strong of like a fashion scene or industry, then I was like, oh, I can mold it to be what I want it to be, which I think that I have affected a good amount of fashion by staying here. And then it's like, it's also like my parents lived here. They're artists too. So I already had a really good basis of like art, just like community. And then, the house that we live in is very important to me. And I would never be able to afford a studio the way that, the size that it is. So that's also why I liked it. But also like I'm an only child and my parents were older. So I just wanted to make sure that I could be like close by if needed, which I was very glad when my dad was dying, then I could just, kind of drop everything and help him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For most people, they'll toy around with moving across the US. But for most people, the answer of like, where's the best place to live is not one of those random articles from Newsweek about like the best city to live in 2023, which is some random place in Arizona. Instead, it's usually like where your peers are and your family members are. Mm-hmm. That's like going to make your life a lot easier and a lot more fulfilling. Although I am reading a book right now called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber. And it's what's fascinating in it is like, it's very clear from archaeology that like in prehistory, like for hunter-gatherers, it was the norm to travel extremely long distances and end up like on other sides of like what now would be countries, like really far distances. And they had like these systems where like, you had your tribe, but then there would also be like this totemic identity that you would have. Like, for example, for Native Americans, they could be part of the elk or beaver clan. Mm-hmm. And at the time back then, that would grant you like passage across like the entire continent. And it's like, it's fascinating to think about like the world being that different. Like it was very free in that way where like you think about them not being able to share the same languages. And it's like, how could you even go like 100 miles away? But they'd be able to go like hundreds of miles without even being able to talk to like other people. It's like fascinating. That was a cool aside, but now we can get into chainmail itself. So to start out a little bit, I just want to address like early history of chainmail just because I like just mentioning that. So chainmail is oftentimes credited to the Celtics as they were the ones that invented it. That's because of like Roman scholars. They, in their like early writings about history and encyclopedias, things like that, they said that was where it came from, which may be the case, but archaeological evidence seems to like go back to like Slovakia, and there's written evidence from a couple of different regions that goes back even further. Yeah, it's not necessarily like European in its origination. It's contested, but the most common chainmail pattern is called European, and it's usually 4-in-1. Yeah.
I mean, I think so many different places kind of came up with it on their own before. Yeah. Like it's So I don't really know what the full origin is, but I think it's, what is it called? Like the idea of like the things being invented around the same time, but just in different places without them.
Yeah, they can come up with them independently.
Yeah.
I just did that segue just because like now we can start talking about like just a few basic patterns of chainmail for the listeners. So usually when you see someone wearing chainmail in fashion, in history, in advertisement, it's pretty much always European 4-in-1.
Yeah. I think it's because it's like kind of the quickest one to make like fabric type things out of. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. It is effective though, it did serve its purpose for protecting medieval knights and like other military purposes. But for chainmail artists like ourselves, it gets a bit old. It's kind of basic. Definitely. It's like everyone should learn it if they're interested in chainmail. It's a good place to start. But yeah, as chainmail artisans, we aspire to create like more complex patterns. So that's like one of the two most basic ones. The other basic one is Japanese.
Yeah. I mean, I love the look of Japanese weaves so much. I think it's more interesting because, the thing that kind of shows us as viewers that it's a Japanese weave is usually that it involves two different size rings. And it's more, there's like bigger rings that are kind of open and flat looking out at us. And then there's little like smaller rings that are connector rings. So it ends up looking a lot more like lace, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah. And so European, it's all the rings are like horizontal. And then for Japanese, they alternate between horizontal and perpendicular.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple form, but like it's not overrepresented in media or in art to us as Westerners. It's like, it still looks new, but it's essentially the most basic. And when I read Rebecca Moika's book on chainmail, they explained it that like all patterns for chainmail are technically a variation of one of the two, where like they can be classified as either in a way. Yeah,
that's
and
so interesting.
That book helped me so much. I had you to like show me like in person how to create chainmail, but like, yeah, that book is a very good read. I think I wrote it down.
It's called Chained.
Yeah.
And it's by Rebecca Mojica, which looks like Rebecca Mojica, but that's not how you say it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's like for anyone who's starting to get interested in making chainmail by listening to the podcast, like that's a good place to start.
Yeah, the book is beautiful, and I was there when Rebecca was working on it, and like she was literally getting her nails like, buffed up and stuff every single day because she was like, I want this book to look good since there's so many zoom-ins about, very close-ups of hands. She was like, I want it to look pristine. But that's just kind of how her whole company, Blue Buddha Boutique, which was like, the elite but not elitist, just like, very high quality chainmail supply company that Rebecca had started. Yeah.
And even though that company no longer like makes rings, you still have rings from them, I think, unless you've used them all.
No, I still do. Sometimes I have some that I'm like saving for. I'm just like, these are so precious. They sometimes have some. She still sells rings a little bit, but much smaller. She sells through Etsy, and there are these amazing Lindstrom pliers that she sells that are like these snub nose pliers that are shorter that I'm obsessed with. So definitely check those pliers out.
The pliers you use are always from Rebecca Mojica.
I used to buy them directly from Lindstrom. First I bought them through Rebecca through Blue Buddha, and then I bought them through Lindstrom for a while because I had a contact there who actually came to my high school show Repetitive Motions from California, but he doesn't work there anymore. So I went back to just buying them through Rebecca. But also you can't really buy the snub nose pliers through their website, I think. You can only buy them through Rebecca.
Yeah. Yeah, for the people listening who don't know, like when you work with chainmail, as at least for us, I mean, I think there are people who do weld the rings, but usually it's just with pliers. Like you don't need heat in the process of making chainmail.
Yeah, that's why I like it. I like the cold connections. It makes it easy, portable. I can bring it all over the place.
Yeah, it's insane when I go to museums and I see chainmail that's been riveted. Oh my gosh, the amount of time that must have took them.
I know, and because they're like hand drilling it too. It's free electricity.
I know, like thousands and thousands of hours had to go into that.
It's very, very wild. I I cannot handle it.
Yeah.
I would not be able to have that type of patience.
Yeah. But yeah, to get back into some basic chainmail patterns, there's also scale mail, which we mentioned Sky is wearing. That one, it looks very different, but it's kind of European 4-in-1 in its essence.
Yeah. It's basically European 4-in-1, but
Yeah.
just replacing, well, not replacing, but like instead of some of the rings, you have scales instead.
Instead of so for the 4-in-1, instead of the one being another ring, it's a scale.
Yeah. And when we say like a number in another number, that means that like there are 4 rings connected to every ring.
Yes.
And there's like Japanese 12 and 2. So there's 12 rings connected to every 2 rings.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's so many variations. And then 2 other basic ones to mention are very similar, Byzantine and Persian. These ones are more like for making ropes.
Yeah.
And I find they actually take up space more quickly than European 4-in-1. But like people feel like they don't need to make them as much because they're more interested in making garments or something else. But they're very good for jewelry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're great for jewelry. Like I've seen so many old ladies wearing Byzantine pattern necklaces that are like gold.
Yeah. When I do workshops at the library all the time, and I've started to do chainmail ones.
Nice.
And I usually do them. I usually encourage people to do Byzantine.
Yeah.
It's easier than trying to help them make a whole sheet, in
For
a
sure.
2-hour workshop.
That's what I think I did.
Yeah.
I did Byzantine when I did a workshop at the library too.
Yeah.
I'm really obsessed with the Persian weaves though. I use full Persian in order to make my chainmail out of chainmail, which I call meta mail.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good transition. So for the next section, I want to talk about some chainmail patterns you created or like you just heavily used and popularized. So can you explain what meta mail is?
Yeah, meta mail is chainmail out of chainmail. I make jumbo rings out of full Persian that I then like connect onto itself to create a ring. And then I chainmail those. And when I started doing that, I would then chainmail it into European 4-in-1. But then I got really into making the full Persian weave out of these full Persian rings. So now it's like a tessellation.
Yeah.
And I keep on being like, I want to make meta mail and make a giant ring out of this meta mail and then chainmail that. But
yeah,
I don't think I have time for that.
And I've seen you do it not just with jump rings, but also clothing.
Yeah. I do it with clothing. I've made chainmail out of snow, and I've drawn it in wood burning. I've made it out of fabric in many different ways. Sometimes using upholstery cord that's then covered in spandex. Sometimes it's wire that then is also covered in like kind of like braided fabric over it. Some of it's just twisted fabric. I've made it out of paper. I've made chainmail out of everything that I could think of to make it out of.
Yeah. And then another one I'm sure you invented, shard mail, right?
Oh yeah, shard mail was made for a Paris show with my friend and collaborator Sarah Weiss, who was actually one of my dad's collaborators first.
Yeah, I met them many times. You started to like collaborate with them for the first time when I was an intern with you. How have they been?
Yeah, she's doing really good.
Yeah,
she's a sexologist now.
Does she still make art?
Not as much, because she's been trying to do school for sex therapy. So I think that's really cool though. But yeah, we did this series of 3 shows during Paris Fashion Week. They were called Boys, Pearls, and Girls. And so for girls, she had some plexiglass laser cut by Marina Feeney. They were like the offcuts of a shape that was being made for Sarah Weiss's show. Marina was doing more kind of sculptural, like set pieces. But so the like negative spaces were then she added some holes to it. So then I figured out how to kind of chainmail those together in a pattern that I created. And so that's what I called shard mail.
Yeah, and it looks spiky. It's like...
It's extremely sharp.
Yeah, it looks a little bit like scale mail, but if it was, pointier. And then I remember it seemed to me as like a Maker Lab, makerspace person, it seemed like they were laser cut.
Yeah, they were all laser cut.
Yeah.
And then, Sarah Weiss was like, I want it to be like wearing daggers. Like, I want it to be super dangerous to wear. And I was like, okay. So it is extremely sharp. And I think she did get cut a little bit. But I have some accessories. If you don't hug people or sit down in them, it's okay. Like, you just have to be careful. But she was just like flopping around on a bed and like hugging people wearing this shard mail and like cutting herself up. And I was like, Sarah, please don't hurt yourself.
Yeah. I had a professor at SASU at a jewelry company business, and she told us as a class that she was purchasing insurance in case someone wore one of her pieces and hurt themselves or someone else.
Yeah.
And she had a disclaimer for people who bought her pieces, but they were very sharp.
Yeah. I think I know which teacher you're talking about.
Yeah, Laura Prieto Velasco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she had some like dagger earrings.
Yeah. Yeah. And then are there any patterns you've been brainstorming like that are new?
Not really. I'm not much of like a pattern inventor type person. Rebecca has invented many patterns.
Yeah.
But yeah, I more so am interested in like, changing up materials and doing things in different ways. I think I'm interested in making more of my soft sculpture chainmail out of upholstery cord covered with spandex. So I've been meaning to get back into that more lately. But then, I've also just been making a good amount of these chainmail packers for gallery shows.
Yeah. And the packers are metamail, right?
Yeah, they're metamail packers. Yeah. I have them in different colors. They were just in a really cute show called Here to Lounge that was curated by my friend Finnegan Shannon at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland. And it was on a conveyor belt that they had created where there was little dishes with everybody's art, and all the art was like, around like playing card to tissue box size. And then you sit on comfy chairs and the art comes to you and you can pick it up and interact with it and then put it down. So it's like supposed to be like the most accessible way to view art in a gallery.
Wow. That's cool. And then I was thinking about it. It's like your chainmail pieces and your garments, they blend together very well. How do you achieve that? Like, how do you connect the two aesthetics? Because in many ways they're different, but seamlessly they blend together in your work.
Yeah, I guess it's just because of like, I was creating all of the chainmail and like found object work in high school and then needed to come up with something to go underneath. So the spandex became the thing to go underneath it very early on. And then I got more into color blocking the spandex and making the spandex more interesting. Like I wanted to make it interesting enough that it didn't need a ton of chainmail in order to make it cool. But I don't know. I feel like maybe to some other people it might not really go together, but like I think because I just make them both things that like I really like. The styling is all just like my aesthetic. So then it just somehow goes together.
Yeah.
I have heard from a lot of people that the way that I make things like seems like I'm a painter. So like the way that I make
People say that about everything. It's like the majority of artists are painters. The majority of art people look at is paintings, and then they just say that.
You might be right. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, but no, for color scheme, I think that's a big part of it. I know that like, so for some of the jump rings that you got from Blue Buddha, was the pink one like custom made for you? I know it's rare. There's something about it that's rare.
Yeah, it's really rare. Like, so Blue Buddha had it for a while, and then they closed. And then now I mostly get my stuff through the Ring Lord, which is a Canadian company.
Yeah, I recommend them too. Yeah. Because I found out about them through you, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like them as much as Blue Buddha, but I don't know if it's also just because like, yeah, Blue Buddha was just such an amazing company also because like Rebecca is queer and POC and like feminist and awesome. And like, that's like most of the people who worked for her. And like her first employee was the first trans person that I met who was not like in the entertainment industry, which I mean, I know, you know, my mom's a professional dancer. So like a lot of the people I know in general are just in entertainment industry, but it was exciting to me to meet a trans person who was not just like a singer or dancer.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is just like a normal person packing jump rings. I could be that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just really liked the model of her company and was really sad when it closed. But the Ring Lord sometimes has like a really fun pink when they've done custom orders for, I don't know, people who have more money and then they sell off the extras. And so when that's happened, I just buy as much as possible of it.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to make myself a like pink and turquoise tails coat for, I don't know, probably 10 years almost now.
Would you need to custom order those colors?
No, I have them. I've had them, but I just, I don't really get to do as much like full garments for myself for fun anymore. It's like, you know, mostly
chainmail
orders.
takes a while. But I know you go very fast. Like your headpieces, I think you said at one point you could do them in 4 hours.
Oh,
4 days. Never mind.
4 days. Yeah. 4 days for the colorful ones that have lots of different things going on. The first scale mail headpiece I made took me 2 days. And a lot of headpieces when I start out have taken me 2 days. I think sometimes it's a little bit harder to try to copy the shape rather than just like free flowing and like, you know, checking as I went to like by draping.
Yeah.
So yeah, copying a pattern, not like a chainmail or like a clothing pattern is a little bit harder.
Yeah. I want to circle it back to the color thing, but for me as a viewer, it seems like color is an important way to link the two together.
Yeah.
And I was sort of asking about that because I was like, you know, there's only so many colors they offer jump rings in. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that kind of informs what fabrics you pick at times? Like you're trying to match them?
No, not necessarily. I mean, most of the chainmail clothes that I have made in the past were silver or black just because it was easier to match those consistently. But also because I feel like for a little bit I was letting people influence me and being like, oh, well, in order to be taken seriously, you have to look serious, which now, like, being taken seriously was something very important to me when I was a high schooler because I was so passionate about what I was doing and I knew my ultimate goal of what I wanted to do in my life. And I think people would just kind of like, you know, pass it off as like, oh, you're just a high schooler or something. And I'm like, no, I'm extremely passionate and I will do this goal, like just very determined. But finally, once I was able to be taken more seriously as a serious artist, I was like, oh, cool. Now I can just do all of the colors I wanted. I mean, I already was like, quote unquote, pushing the envelope or whatever by having my colorful unitards under the like more muted chainmail clothing that like many colleges wouldn't even look at my portfolio because they'd be like, ugh, too colorful.
They made a mistake.
I know, they really made a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing you can give to SAC is like, you know, you made the right call. Yeah.
Yeah. They made the right call, but I did not. I should have just not gone to college and just started my clothing line right away out of high school.
And then one final thing on colors. One time when we were working in the studio together as an intern, you know, I was explaining how I oftentimes exclude colors in order to get like a cohesive aesthetic between projects or even with like how I dress. And, you know, there's such a range of colors that you use, but like you realize talking to me that like you don't really use the color red. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really use the color red because I was dressed in it so much as a child.
Yeah.
Because my Filipino grandmother sewed a lot of my clothing, and she would say like weird things like, "Oh, I don't use this word at all, and I hate this word," but she'd be like, "You're Oriental, so you look good in red," and I'd be like, "Grandma, you're making me so uncomfortable." So, yeah, I don't use red, and I don't wear a lot of black, but a lot of people order my things in black, which is fine. You know, it's up to them. But like, yeah, I think I also just, you know, most people's idea of what is sexy is always like red or black.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a lot of, you know, queer lingerie and stuff, but I didn't want it to be based on anything that was already in the scheme of what cis heteronormative lingerie was. I just wanted it to be totally different.
Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to talk about is like, do you ever feel like chainmail is more trendy from one moment to the next? Because I feel like just because of the amount of work it takes to create it, it's never going to be like widely available unless, you know, there's all these chainmail artisans everywhere. I don't really see it happening, but I think that's kind of a good thing because like it makes it kind of permanently exciting because you don't see it that often.
I really agree with you. I mean, yeah, when I read that in your notes for this episode, I was like, oh, that's totally right. I mean, you know, there's different times where it's been more popular, like in the 1920s or something with the tiny chainmail purses.
That's true. I actually have one in my house from my great grandmother. Yeah.
Wow, that's really that's so cool.
I know. I got it as like in middle school when my grandmother was going to move to California. And why did it go to me? I'm never going to go outside with it personally. But I do take very good care of antiques. And I have most of my family's antiques, including that one.
Wow. Yeah. My mom gave me 2 vintage ones, but yeah, I don't have any familial connection to it. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any... I've never actually seen a picture of that great grandmother when she was younger, but like I would love to see a picture of her with it. That'd be really cool.
That would be cool. Yeah, and then like in the 60s with Paco Rabanne. I mean, it's not technically actually chainmail, but chainmail looking things for a lot of his designs.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes it has a little bit more of a moment, but I agree with you that I think it's still always exciting.
Yeah, and Paco Rabanne is still actually sort of doing that pseudo chainmail stuff because I just saw Dune 2 days ago, which was amazing. And within it, I'm not the biggest Dune fan. This was my first time watching it, but there was a new character in part 2, the daughter of the Emperor. And she's wearing a modification of what was apparently like a Paco Rabanne fall-winter 2020 dress. Mm-hmm. And I actually like it. And it's very appropriate for the scene because it's towards the end of the movie and war is breaking out. I won't ruin anything more than that, but it's a very beautiful piece.
I literally got a message from somebody being like, did Dune hire you?
Yeah.
But nope.
There should be a movie that hires you one day.
I know. I've lent a bunch of my stuff to Holy Trinity movie. So there's some chainmail and some Rebirth Garments in that and some other things. But I think probably Holy Trinity movie is best aesthetic for my stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what if there was a Xena warrior princess movie?
I would die.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I was thinking about that to bring up Xena, because it's like, yeah, I see Rebirth Garments as like just all of my special interests as a child. Xena, the Warrior Princess, the Spice Girls, and Sailor Moon. Just like if you smushed all of those together, that is what Rebirth Garments looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I also have like, I've had a very vibrant life at this point, and I see all these connections between like early me and younger me and current me. But yeah, I've only ever seen that show when I was making Chainmail with you, because when you're making Chainmail, for listeners, it's like you have busy hands. Your mind doesn't have to be that busy though. It's like sort of intuitive, and you get muscle memory as you're working on whatever you're creating. And you get a lot of time to just put like a show on the background, but you don't really get to watch it. Like if something is starting to be like very like interesting, you can put your head up and really watch it. But like, it's mostly like for the background. And so when I work with Sky in the studio, and I know you do this on your own too, you'll put something on that like you get to kind of watch, but not really.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like to rewatch a lot of shows. So, like, yeah, I put Xena on a lot.
Hey, your mom has a really big DVD collection.
Yes, the biggest. She could open her own Blockbuster.
It's not in the same spot, though, because we were downstairs earlier. I think it moved.
Oh, yeah, we moved it. Yeah.
Did it get bigger?
Yes, yeah.
We
need to have like she wants to get some special shelves built for it. So, but yeah, we had to move it because we wanted to make the hallway more accessible to our wheelchair accessible bathroom.
Yeah. And then, before, I want to just ask before we move on, but do you like Dune? Have you ever read it or know anything about it?
I know nothing about it. I like it's like, I know my mom was really into the first Dunes.
Yeah.
The first Dune, but I should look into it. I think sometimes when people say that my stuff looks like something, I, for some reason, will just like not look at it then for a long time, because I'm just like, I get tired.
I did not think the chainmail in Dune looked like your work.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about it as like a chainmail and pop culture thing.
No, totally. I mean, that's usually the case of something that people say my stuff looks like. I think the first thing that was notable that people kept on saying was when I was in high school, and people would be like, "Oh, you look like just like what Lady Gaga makes," or something, and I'd be like, she doesn't make her clothing. She has a stylist. Also, I've been doing this already for a couple of years. Who is this person? And then shortly after that, it was like Avatar, like the 3D Avatar blue people. And then it was like 300. So it was just, all these different things that look completely different from each other, but they have like some sort of maybe aesthetic relation or like material relationship to something that I do. And then everybody's like, that's what you do. I'm like, but I feel like I haven't had that for a while, because I think maybe people started to understand more what I did.
I think your work has become more visually distinct over time.
Yeah.
Like early work, I can see an element of what you do now, of course, but your pieces are so maximal. I don't think there's anything more you could do to make them more striking.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to ask, so for people who are listening that might be inspired now, that's kind of the point of like the podcast that I'm doing. It's like, I want people to walk away with like more understanding and just more excitement about topics. It's like, we're doing cultural analysis, but it's not reductive, it's additive. Mm-hmm. Like I would love for people, to like spring up into action and go do things after this. And so some people might be interested in like chainmailing now. So I think it would just be helpful for them to talk about like some of the basics they'd need. So as you mentioned, they need pliers.
Yes. I like, for beginners, there are some Eurotool brand pliers with red handles. I think that Rebecca sells them on the Blue Buddha boutique Etsy. But yeah, it's a flat nose plier with, it's like kind of springs. Yeah. So you really want flat nose pliers that don't have teeth or like, in their jaws, because you don't want to mar the rings. And you need ones with a spring. Yeah,
the marring, it scrapes off color if they're anodized or something.
Scrapes off color, and it just makes like non-anodized things just like look junky, like gross.
Yeah.
Like it just looks like it's been through a meat grinder or something. Then, so need the smooth, flat nose pliers. Euro tool red handles. Those are good because they're a little bit more ergonomic than there's other ones with shorter handles, but they'll kind of hurt your hands more. And then, for like, if this is something that you're really going to get into, the Lindstrom flat nose pliers. And then now I'm obsessed with the Lindstrom snub nose pliers. They have shorter jaws, so it gives you more leverage, which is really nice.
Yeah. I remember when I was learning, I did start out with those red handled ones that were simple. Mm-hmm. And then I got to use yours and I was like, this is so much better.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like it makes it go twice as fast.
Totally. And it's so much better for your hands. So I usually try to like, at least now, like graduate people to that as soon as possible. Like as soon as you know that like, okay, yes, this is something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, cause hand health is the most important. And also like, making sure that you do neck and back exercises. I've had like chronic pain from the amount of chainmailing that I've done for for this whole time, but I just started seeing a chiropractor in the last year and like things are amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah. For me, actually, my shoulders have gotten weak in a particular way. I'll still go back to that right as we close from doing chainmail too much. It's like, I haven't done it nearly as much as Sky, but like, it's not something that like I can do every year, every month. You know, it has to be like in spurts. I still do it. I haven't really shown you what I've been working on, but it's like, I can only do that in bursts. I feel like that's safe if you just do it for a few months every other year, and that's okay, but you do have to watch out. And then for jump rings, you mentioned the Ring Lord.
Yeah, if you want like fancier metals, I think Spider chain is great. And like, Rebecca and Spider are friends. So I feel like that's cute. I've heard of a brand called like We've Got Mail. But it's like Maille. For chainmail. Oh yeah, I always use the European spelling of chainmail because otherwise people think that I like am a spammer, like emailer.
Yeah, that's something Rebecca Moika brings up in her book is like the spelling of chainmail. Most chainmail artisans spell it like CHAINMAILLE, which is the French spelling. I'm not going to use that for the episode title just because I'm already esoteric enough. I need people to know what they're getting with this episode.
Okay, yeah. So you'll do it just MAIL.
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, Nathan is just talking about people who send chain letters. Like you got to send this to the next 10 people or you're cursed forever.
Yeah. Another thing with the rings is like there's different materials you can use. Steel is really hard. I've never even really worked with it. I always do aluminum just because it's so much easier on your hands. Yeah,
they have improved the alloys that are like used for steel chainmail a lot. So when I first started, steel was so difficult to work with, but then they've made ones that are like easier to work with. So I started using that sometimes and I was like, oh, this is so much better. But yeah, I don't use steel very much, mostly because I want to make things that are like to garments, and the aluminum is heavy enough as a garment. So I have no clue how people wore the steel chainmail back in the day.
Yeah. And they had to go long distances with it too on their back.
And like on a horse, like the horses are just way
Horses
down.
are so strong though. I feel like they're okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah. But yeah, besides jump rings and chainmail, maybe you get the Rebecca Moika book.
Yeah. I think it's out of print, but you can still sometimes find it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much all you need to chainmail with.
I recommend also having a bead mat so that your little jump rings don't, if you drop them, which you will, they don't scatter everywhere. So it's like a little piece of fabric with kind of it's a little bit like velvet, but not really. It doesn't have that same like creepy feel if you're a person adverse to velvet. It's mostly soft, but it has like, it just holds the rings up, and then you can scoop up the rings with your pliers easier. Yeah.
For me, it felt more like felt.
Yeah, it's a little like felt.
Yeah.
It's like a felt velvet.
They're probably related, the two fabrics. It was crazy to me the time that I learned what felt was made out of, like animal hair, like beaver hair.
Oh, it's wool.
Yeah.
It's sheep wool.
Yeah. I don't know. I always just assumed it was synthetic just because I was always used to it being synthetic. But yeah, before we close out, thank you, Sky, for this wonderful podcast episode. I just wanted to talk about for the viewers, like, and just share with you about like something with me about how like, I was sort of introduced to so many topics around disability through working with you. I really didn't know that much upon starting. And I learned like so many terms from you, like wheelchair user, and just like how to be more inclusive. But something I think it probably came up with you, but I also heard this through professors at SAC, how there's like broadly this idea within like disability theory circles that like one way to think about ability is like we earn and lose abilities over the course of our lives. And in many ways, like we all will need assistance as we age. A lot of people lose the ability to do things like walk, like myself actually in a way, like 5.5 years ago, I had like a foot sprain. Wasn't that serious. I was getting off a bus and I twisted my foot, but I had never been injured before. And then I started to walk incorrectly for like 6 months. I had to like rebuild all my muscle groups because I started to compensate that badly. And I'm still actually sort of dealing with it. Like I'm seeing a physical therapist currently, which is crazy because it's been so long. Yeah. But like, and then a year and a half ago, I got diagnosed with visual snow syndrome.
Yeah.
You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see static and after images at all times. And like, I don't know, it's just wild, like experiencing this firsthand of like, and understanding like how we need to make the world more accessible. Like for me, when I had that foot sprain and I then had to be in crutches for a while, just like seeing people in public who walked slower than me or faster than me now that I was in crutches, and just like noticing like how difficult it was for me to go upstairs and things. So many people just don't even know what accessibility means or like why it's important, but they're going to experience it firsthand, like pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you live long enough.
Yeah.
And everyone. Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to bring that up because oftentimes during the course of like when I'm recording with Joseph, I actually like will bring up like, oh, my body's like not feeling well, but I like edit it out of the episode just because I don't know. I guess I'm like, I don't want to be like a burden on listeners or something, but yeah, I feel like it's something I can talk about with you.
Yeah, you should just leave it in. Just normalize it.
Yeah. For me, it's oftentimes just because what's going on with me is complex. Like, technically what's going on with me with the walking is like poor motor control. I just usually say I have like biomechanical issues, but like it's not even really like a syndrome or like something to diagnose. It's just like I screwed up and like my muscles compensated, and that doesn't happen to most people. But I thank you so much for like teaching me how to chainmail and also just introducing me to like so many concepts and ideas and sharing them with the world.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you identify with being neurodivergent, but I feel like that's like why I don't know, why we're like drawn to each other, like our having very strong special interests in things and like seeing things in neurodivergent ways. But I don't know if you actually identify that way.
Not that much. I mean, my family, they'll allude to things like that, but I feel like they're the weird ones. So
well, it doesn't necessarily mean, yeah, I just feel like, yeah.
But no, I can see that. I do have like a very active mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, do you have any final things you'd like to share as we conclude the episode?
I think there are some some chainmail workshops that I have available online. One of them through Radical Fit on the U Media Chicago YouTube page for the Chicago Public Library. It was a collaboration with the Mad Skills kits at the Chicago Public Library. So you can see how to make, I think, a Byzantine bracelet online for free.
Yeah, that's a free resource on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can put a link in the show notes. Are there any other things you'd like to boost? As always, you have your shop.
Yeah, I have rebirthgarments.com. You can check out the shop. You can check out my Instagram. I'm extremely shadow banned right now. It's at Rebirth Garments, just one word. You can reach out to me at rebirth.garments@gmail.com. I give talks about radical visibility, and I also do workshops. I have done some virtual chainmail workshops that were live with folks, and those have worked out really cute. So that's also an option if anybody wants to learn how to chainmail in a COVID cautious way online.
Do check out all those plugs. I'll link a lot of them in the show notes. But thanks for listening this week, and have a good one.
Cute.
Bye.